Taoiseach, last year the Minister for Finance rightly acknowledged that Midland communities felt very threatened by the wind down of Bordnamona and the closure of ESB power stations in the region. He also stated at that time that it was the duty of government to ensure that no cohort of citizens, workers, communities or enterprises were left behind by this disruption, a disruption that would hit Midland counties like Offaly very hard. Unfortunately, however, following the decision taken by Bordnamona last week to end peat harvesting and production, that is exactly what has happened. Communities have been left behind. And this is particularly true for all of those involved in the horticulture sector. They are left behind. Indeed, the Just Transition Commissioner himself, Kieran Mulvey, said that it was likely to act as the final nail in the coffin of our Indigenous horticultural industry. The Commissioner also noted that we had solved one problem only to create another, an entirely new one, and one from now on that we would simply have to import horticultural peat product rather than produce it ourselves. There are echoes here of the EU proposal from 2005 for the reforming of the sugar industry, reforms, I might add, that eventually destroyed the viability of sugar beet growing in Ireland and put 4,000 growers out of business. All of these problems now faced by the Midlands is a direct result of the decision to escalate the so-called Just Transition process from 10 years to a matter of months. This has guaranteed, contrary to the government commitments, that entire communities are indeed being left behind. Perhaps communities in Offaly might have been able to absorb this shock if it were not for the very other many profound challenges that they are facing at the very same time. We have a forestry sector in bureaucratic chaos, and we also have upcoming EU regulations that will severely limit and in some cases destroy the capacity of agricultural merchants. We also have the Irish grain and feed industry about to be hit with unsustainable tariffs and levies. In many ways, this amounts to a kind of death by 1,000 cuts, Taoiseach. And my question here today is, will you ensure that there is immediate revaluation and impact assessment of the Just Transition process, as well as a commitment from this government to actually follow through with its stated aim of ensuring that no citizens, workers, communities or enterprises will be left behind? The people of Offaly and the wider Midlands area deserve better and nothing less than that, Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. I very much appreciate the extent to which ESB and Bordnamona were the mainstay of employment in the Midlands, and how important it is to the region and to Laois and Offaly in particular, but the region as a whole. And where there is a just transition has to be not just for the workers and the former workers, but also for the communities as well, because somebody may get a good package to retire or become redundant, but the payroll lost to the town or the community can have a huge impact, so we need to see it in the round. Bordnamona no longer has a licence to harvest peat. That has stopped, and you know the reasons as to why that is. And this could impact on the horticulture industry and mushroom growers, and we are looking for alternatives and affordable alternatives for those particular industries. In terms of what we can do around employment, you'll be aware that there is now a Just Transition Commissioner, that there is a specific fund for the Midlands that is being invested in the Midlands, particularly because it's the area that's being first, if you like, to experience this transition. My own department will be developing a new set of regional jobs plans, and that will include a regional jobs plan for the Midland region. So we'll be putting a lot of focus into that as well, making sure that there are new employment opportunities for people in the area.
Taoiseach, you did not answer my question. The Just Transition Plan is falling apart. There's actually a meeting this week in the County Council in Offaly with the Just Transition Commissioner. It's falling apart, it's not delivering for communities, Taoiseach, and you're reneging on your government's duty to ensure that communities are not left behind. Instead, what this government is doing is pursuing and prioritising vague aspirational biodiversity priorities in place of those that are important, such as employment. I mean, we have a situation now where people with mortgages, with children to feed, clothe and educate, are playing second fiddle to those aspirational biodiversity priorities that you and your government have put first, with little or no understanding of the Midlands and counties like Offaly. And I'm asking you here, Taoiseach, to please re-evaluate this plan, because it is not working. There's no confidence in it now. It's not creating employment, and people cannot remain unemployed while government achieves its climate change targets. There is a better way of doing things, and I believe that climate change targets should not be acting as a veto for common sense, and that's what's happening here. There is a practical, fair and just way of doing things, but the Just Transition Plan is not working.
Deputy, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. We need to act to stop climate change. If we don't act to stop climate change, I think many more jobs will be lost by the climate chaos that would ensue. So, I think we need to think short-term, medium-term and long-term when it comes to the trade-off between jobs and industry on the one hand and protecting our environment on the other. If we don't stop climate change, the impacts on Ireland could be very severe on many of our industries, not least on agriculture and also on tourism. But in terms of the climate actions that we take, we need to make sure that we do it in such a way that we don't see a net reduction in employment, and that's very much what our plan is all about. I do think the Just Transition Plan is a good one, by the way. I appreciate you may feel differently. It is funded with money from the carbon tax. And to give one example, the bog restoration and bog re-wetting programme is transferring people in Bord na Móna who would have been cutting bogs, releasing CO2, into a new role where they're re-wetting bogs and restoring bogs, which makes them a carbon sink. But I certainly will take on board what you said, and will make sure that the Just Transition Commissioner and his team are aware of your comments.
Now we're